Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's video where I'm going to be talking about how to make a campaign and story that lasts in any RPG. Now, this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart because it was my first Dungeons and Dragons campaign that I ever ran, particularly one session, about 7 or so sessions in which I loved this hobby and helped me realize what it could mean to people. And so I really want to talk about this and talk about how to make an engaging and amazing story for your players that you guys will talk about for years to come, because I mean, guys, that's what this hobby is all about. It's about connecting with your friends. It's about bringing people together to create a unique and compelling story that everybody loves and means something to them and allow them to be vulnerable. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into the video, but this is a topic that's really important to me. I'm probably going to ramble a little bit. This is one of my on-script videos, but I guarantee you I'm going to go off script just because I have a lot that I really love about this topic. I'm going to try and keep it concise, but that out of the way, let's begin. The first thing I want to touch on is, I was touching on a little bit in the intro, and what is it about RPGs, tabletop RPGs specifically, that just means so much to those who play it? I mean, guys, this is one of the most important hobbies I have, is playing Dungeons and Dragons with my friends, and it has been something that has stayed with me for several years now and has meant a ton to me. And it actually took a lot of talking with people who are very close to me and who I care very dearly about to figure out why it was so important to me, what it meant, and that actually helped me dive deeper into it and enjoy it even more. But RPGs have this really weird and unique way of bringing people into a fold where they can be vulnerable and enjoy something with other people that they never thought that they could. When I first started my first campaign, there were people in that group I never thought I would see roleplay, and now are some of the best role players I've ever seen. And it's so weird to see this game be able to open people up to parts of themselves they didn't even know were there in the first place. And so the first thing that I think a RPG can really do is it lets you explore you. And that's so hard to do because in this day and age, a lot of people find it so hard to express themselves, to find who they are, because with social media, the online community and atmosphere that brings, basically in the 21st century, everybody's telling you who you are supposed to be. So finding out who you are as opposed to who everybody thinks you should be is so insanely difficult. And RPGs have this amazing way of pushing all that away and just letting you explore who you are through the lens of a different part of you, which is a character, which I will touch on in a little bit. And on that topic, it also allows you to be vulnerable without context. A lot of the times for people to be vulnerable, especially me, I know I have this problem. I can't be vulnerable, speak my emotions, be honest, unless the situation presents itself. And let's be honest, guys, especially in the terrible year that has been 2020 and 2021, it's real hard to be able to actually meet with people, talk with them. It's real hard to be in that situation where you're going to be vulnerable. And so I've had a really hard time with that. And so some people who are very important to me were trying to help me through that. And I realized that Dungeons and Dragons and RPGs in general were my best way of doing that for a long time, because what it does is it allows you to put yourself in emotional situations where you can be vulnerable and everyone understands it's not you. Character, I should say, is not you, but it is a part of you. And it's in a situation that you're not, so you can be vulnerable, emotional, let some of that stuff out, and everybody understands. There doesn't need to be context. All there is understanding and a group of people who are invested in what's happening. And that is such a unique and valuable experience to be able to have with all these people who are close to you, depending on who's in your group. And so being able to experience that is so important, and I think makes RPGs so important to a lot of people. And it also just lets you experience absurd situations with your friends and let loose that you never would be able to in the real world. I mean, there was a situation in one of my campaigns where the party got into this massive bar fight, which is not something that I would do. That is not my scene. I don't go to bars. And we had this ridiculous thing where they were taking bets on each other and just joking around. And that is something I wouldn't experience in real life, but I got to experience in D&D. And so it really lets you let loose and just have fun with your friends in ways that you never would be able to in the real world. It's just an absurd fantasy world where you guys can do what you want. And that experience is really fun. And on that topic, the other thing about RPGs, I think the last thing that I want to touch on about what makes them so amazing, anyone is welcome. Anyone can come play. And there is a small subsection of the tabletop roleplay game community who gatekeep. Guys, gatekeeping, it's never okay. It's never a good thing. You should not be gatekeeping. If you have been gatekeeping, consider why it is so important to you that other people can't enjoy the things that you enjoy. And really, I think it comes down to just straight up selfishness. You enjoy something and you don't want to feel unspecial or ununique. Yeah, Great grammar there, Caleb, on special, on unique. Oh, man. But you don't want to have this thing that is special to you taken away because other people enjoy it too. And so really gatekeeping is selfish. I usually try and see from other people's points of views, and I try not to come down and condemn anybody, but I have a really hard time finding any way that gatekeeping is not just straight up selfish. But with that out of the way, new players are always welcome in the RPG community, and you get to come and experience it. And it doesn't matter what you want to do. It doesn't matter who you are. There is something out there for each of you. And that's what makes just RPGs, tabletop RPGs in general, so incredibly inviting and awesome and special, because everyone can connect and enjoy on it if they want to. So how can we as dungeon masters, game masters, etc., make a story that means something to the players, to us, to our lives as a whole, a story that will last and continue to stay with the entire group through whatever it is they're going through? Well, number one, please never forget what the heart of the game is. The heart of the game is your players. It has been, always will be, the players. Without the players, the dungeon master can't run a game. The players are what the story is centered on. They are the heart of your story. And if you are not taking them into account, not creating this world and this story for them, then you're probably doing it for yourself. And if that's the case, I mean, it is great to be able to do that, to enjoy it. I personally dungeon master because I find it more fulfilling than being a player oftentimes. But if you just want to create a story just for yourself, not for the rest of the table, go write a book, and that's okay. Go tell a story elsewhere. Just tabletop RPGs are not the medium for you to use. And so keeping that in mind, that the players are the heart of the game, I would take time, even if you've been running a campaign for years now. If you haven't done this, I would legitimately suggest going and doing this. Pull your players aside and ask them one simple question. Why do you play D&D? Or why do you play tabletop RPGs? Now, I know that's like, it's kind of a weird question, a little bit vague, but if you haven't asked this question and you do, you will understand why I'm saying that. The answers that you get will inform what kind of game you should be creating with these people. I personally asked my players this not too long ago because of circumstances that were brought up, and the answers that I got were so illuminating. A lot of them said, I just want to play games with friends. They didn't really mind if it was D&D, they liked D&D, but they just wanted to experience time with us. While others said, I like the experience that D&D gives, the ability to be vulnerable with friends. Those are two very different things, and it lets me know, hey, this person just wants to have fun. This person really wants to explore some interesting things in D&D. Now that doesn't mean party A, I guess, the one who just want to have fun, doesn't want to explore interesting things, but it does let me know that party B, that's what they're focused on. And so it helps me develop that. And so I would really ask your players that, because it lets you get down to the heart of what they're hoping to get out of the game that you guys are playing. And then also in session 0, and if you haven't had a session 0, even if you're, once again, still far along in your campaign, I would have a session 0. It's super important and can really build a lot of amazing trust and an amazing story with your party. So I would go ahead and have that, but there are a lot of questions that I ask in session 0s. The first thing that I ask is what the player hopes their character will become. And I only asked that recently. I did not ask that in my first campaign. In fact, we didn't have a session 0 until far along into it. But in the second campaign, I made sure to ask each player that. I asked them, what is your ideal version of this character? And what is a really cool moment you want to have with them? Because that lets me know where they want their character to go. And I can begin helping guide in that direction, giving them choices, giving them story beats, letting them get to the point they want their character to go. And it also lets me know, hey, when is the moment that I need to turn everything else off and focus on this character? When are they having a character moment? If they are starting to do that thing that I asked about, like, hey, what's the coolest moment that you think your character could have? And then I notice that's happening, stop the presses, point the spotlight at them. This is their moment. And the rest of your table should be able to recognize, if you have built that trust and communicated with them, hey, the Dungeon Master's focusing on this character. Something's about to happen. Let's watch. Let's focus. Let's interact with this. So I would really ask them those questions, because that can really help. The next questions that I ask is, what does their character want in life? What does their character need in life? And what is their major flaw? And this concept comes from some different literary elements. In Creating Character Arcs by K.M. Weiland, which is a great book. Anybody who wants to read that, please go do so. It is one of my favorite books, and it's been a long time since I've read it, but it's got amazing stuff in it. It talks about the want and the need of the character. And the want and the need of a literary character is super important. What they want is what they think they want in the world. What they need is what they actually need to begin to become a better and more fulfilled person. And I've talked about this in one of my other videos. Links in the description if you want to go ahead and look at that. But the want and the need are super important for creating really deep and developed characters, because it really helps inform you as a player and as the dungeon master. What is this character trying to achieve, and what do they need to achieve to overcome themselves? So I ask all those questions of the players in session 0, because what that does as a DM is it lets me know what story beats, what plot hooks, what things are important to these characters. And I began developing those early on. I don't know exactly what shape it's going to take, but I think in my head, I know that this character wants to avenge their parents, for example. But I know what they need is to understand that vengeance is not going to fulfill them. You've probably watched movies where you've seen tons of characters like that. That's a very basic example. But I can start to develop that. And when they get to those moments, when they have a chance to avenge their parents, I can put a choice in front of them. You can avenge your parents. You can get closer to that goal. Or you can go do this. You can help this party member. You can help this NPC. And they have to choose one or the other. And I'll put that there because I know that the player, that is important to them. They know that their character wants this but needs this. And now they get to have a cool character moment. And those are the moments that will stick in players' heads. If your characters aren't having to make important choices in your campaign, my personal opinion, 100%, I don't think it's going to stick in their heads. I don't think that the story is going to mean much to them because our characters are only as important as the decisions that they have to make. If they have to make no decisions, they are not protagonists. They are not important characters in the story. They're just vessels to explore your world. And while there are some groups that can do that, I don't think that's an interesting game. And so building off of that, one of the other things that you can really do to make a story important to your characters and your players is to challenge their flaws. Look at the flaws that they gave you at the beginning of the game in session 0 or whenever you manage to get it from them. In fact, a lot of players have already written this down on their character sheet, so you can just ask them to give you that. But look at their flaws. Look at what's in front of them and challenge those flaws. Put a situation in front of them where acting on that flaw will negatively impact them. This allows your players to do two things. And it's really cool if your characters are really into roleplay. It allows them to either make a choice for roleplay reasons that they know will affect them negatively, which that then means they are invested in the story. They are more interested in what's happening in the story and the consequences of that than the mechanics. And for me, that's peak D&D. That is exactly where I want to be. If they get to make that decision and they get to have those negative impacts, or they get to choose to grow as a character and push past their flaw. And that is also an amazing moment because it means their character is growing and changing. And that's also peak D&D for me. It is a character pushing back against what they want because they have to do better. That's great. That's a positive character arc. I love that. And that is the kind of stuff that I want to see in the games that I create. And following up on that, and this is really important if your characters have chosen to negatively impact themselves to follow through on their flaws, reward their character for their strength. One of the things I've often done in my campaigns is put situations in front of my characters where they have to, in front of my players, not my characters, my players, the player characters. I am pretty sure I've messed that up 1,000 times in this video, and I'm going to continue to over the course of this channel. I am so sorry. But I put these difficult situations in front of my player characters, and they make the decision that negatively impacts them. I have really heavy roleplay groups that I DM for, and so they do this consistently, and I think it's amazing. But the follow-up on that, in order to maintain trust and let them know that you are interested in helping their character and developing an interesting story, not just hurting them, always, almost always, not always, but almost always, a session or two later, I will then have that character rewarded for choosing to roleplay properly or for acting on their strengths. I will give them a magic item. I will have them gain information, something along those lines. If a player character chooses to do something negative for the sake of the story, reward that. Don't let them just feel bad about it, because what they did was they invested in your story, and if you don't reward it, if you don't help them out, if you don't give them something, all you're communicating to them is, well, next time you should probably just not roleplay properly. You should do better. You should avoid everything that will ever hurt your character. And in my opinion, that's not a fun story. It's not a fun game. And again, this whole video is based so much on my opinion, but I feel really strongly about it. And so you have to reward them. You have to be able to help them out and do something to show them, hey, great job. You've created a compelling narrative and I am right here with you. I am all for it. A great example of this is in one of my campaigns that I've run that's only been running recently, one of my players touched a cursed magic item. They knew it was cursed. The player knew, their character didn't, but it was so obvious. But they touched it because it was something their character would do. He was too curious, so he touched it. And there are going to be negative effects that will follow him through probably a large portion of the campaign because of that. And so he has been willing to accept that. And so what I've done is I've begun to give him information from his backstory, because he did that, I started to seed that into the world, and he's begun to experience it because, hey, yes, you experienced this negative consequence because of a role-playing moment, so I'm going to further along the information that you have because that was amazing. I don't mean to make players sound like animals that you can train. That is not the case here. This is a mutual relationship. They know what I'm doing. They know that, hey, I am giving you this to help along your story because you are also invested in the story. It's all about investment from both sides. So that was a long tangent, but basically, put your players in front of situations that will challenge their characters. And if they choose to take that negative impact, or if they choose to invest in their character, reward it. Give them something else. Continue to build with them. As much as they invest, you should invest equal amounts back. Another thing that you can do is to watch what catches your characters. Watch what catches your players' eyes. So there have been a lot of moments in the first campaign where things just obviously were very interesting to the players. I introduced an NPC whose name was Zell Stonebreaker, and he was a very big man who had a lot to prove, and he was the captain of a pirate ship, and he showed up because the bard was having a concert. And he heard that, and he went into this concert, and he loved the music and decided he was going to start a mosh pit right then and there. And I thought the character was just going to be a one-off. I thought he was kind of fun to just be there. And the bard very clearly took an interest to this character. Almost immediately, I was told out of game after that session, man, I hope that NPC comes back. I didn't really intend for him to come back, but the moment they said that, I went, all right, that is something they enjoy. This is something that has caught them up, and I'm going to add it into the campaign again. He ended up being the captain of the ship that was going to ferry them across the sea, and he was with them the whole campaign to the point where he died in one of their large battles and was resurrected as a god because of the belief that the party had in him. And eventually, actually, the bard got into a relationship with this god, and that's kind of where the campaign ended, is he went to have a relationship with the god. I mean, crazy. I never expected it to go that way when I introduced this one-off character, but hey, they enjoyed it. It was important to them. Another example is one of the players very early on in the Lost Mines of Phandelver, which is what we started this campaign on, and then I homebrewed it from there. There's a magic item called Talon. It is a simple sword that deals extra damage to orcs, I believe. Actually, does it deal extra damage to orcs? I'm going to go grab it. I'm going to find out. Give me a second. Yeah, I keep it right here. Whoop. Yeah, pretty much all my D&D paraphernalia is actually sitting right behind me. Actually, unfortunately, now that I think about it, you guys just saw me wear my ugly sweatpants. Oh well. So, looking through the Lost Mines of Phandelver here. No way. All right, we're going to take a tangent on this video. I'm so sorry. This video is going to be so long and so all over the place. I actually have the original character sheets from the adventure in here. I didn't realize that. These are the first character sheets my group ever used. I haven't opened this in so long. I didn't realize I had that. That's amazing. I have old notes throughout this whole thing. Okay, after looking through this whole thing, Talon was actually just a +1 longsword. I could have sworn it had some other extra ability. I may have just added that myself, but yeah, apparently it was just a +1 longsword. So fun tangent. I apologize for going on that, but I'm kind of glad that I went through this whole thing. So anyways, back to the video. But anyways, Talon was found, and the fighter who used it was really interested in it. And later on, they got in a fight with this pirate queen, long story. They killed her, and she had another sword, but the fighter really didn't want to let go of the longsword. Eventually, she did end up using this other sword, which was named Venom Song, and they had this really difficult time letting go of it, but they found out that Venom Song had a trapped soul inside of it, and that caught the player's attention. The player was so intrigued about this soul, and so this soul, which I originally I had there as a plot hook, really became something that was integral to her character, and she ended up befriending the soul after a long amount of time. The soul then transferred from Venom Song into Talon, making Talon Talon Song and upgrading the sword, and that was something that caught her attention. It was something I would not have focused on if she had not. And so that's the really important thing. Watch for things that catch your player's attention and go, all right, I'm developing that. That's interesting to you. I'm not going to just let it go by the wayside. If you're running a predetermined adventure and something catches a player's attention and there's not a lot about it in the book, expand on that. Build on it, because that means something to the player and they're interested in that. And if you want the campaign to mean something to the player, to intrigue them, to interest them, build on the stuff that they're interested in. And that will lead them to be more invested into the campaign. And then the last part for this section, when your players have your moment, and I did touch on this earlier, let them shine. When your player is having the moment where they get to be everything they wanted their character to be, or they are making a sacrifice, or they are role-playing and heavily invested in a moment, focus on it, build on it, invest into it, and most importantly, develop it. And what I mean by develop it is as your player is making this sacrifice, as they're murdering the person who was terrorizing their lives, as they are making a difficult character moment, let them say what they're going to say, let them do what they're going to do. And as a DM, and this again, 100% just my personal preference, but narrate it, give more details, let the other players at the table know this is an important moment. If your character is being sacrificed, if they are holding up a rock that is falling that will crush them to let the other players go out, as they say, I watched the other characters leave and I let the rock drop. Don't just say, the rock drops, you die. Give that a moment. Say, as you let the rock drop and you feel it begin push on top of you, you watch the other characters escape with their lives, knowing that you've saved them. What are your final words? What are your final thoughts? Do you smile? Build on the moment, because the DM has the unique ability to draw everybody else's attention at the table. Even if one player says something's important, if you say it's important, everybody knows that's the truth because you are the creator of this world. So build on those moments, let a player shine when it's time for them to shine, and always watch for that. And a little last tangent that I actually didn't plan on putting in here. One thing that I do is on the hour, every hour, I take a look around the table to see who's not engaged. It's easy to not get engaged as a player. I don't ever blame a player for doing it. Sometimes it's just too much focus on other characters. But when you see that, interact with them. Move in and make something happen in the story that will catch their attention. You don't ever want somebody to feel left out for too long. So on the hour, every hour, I always look around the table and see who's not interested and draw them back in by putting something in front of them. And if they don't want to take it, that's okay. Sometimes people just don't want to be involved. That's fine. But I always give them the option so that they can have fun and be involved in the moment. It's getting really warm in here. I'm actually going to turn on my fan really quick. Oh yeah, get that airflow going, baby. Much better. And that leads me to the last portion of this video. How do you make a story that makes people feel? Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop roleplay games. Every time I say Dungeons and Dragons, you can generally assume I also mean that. It has this way of making people feel, of investing, of wanting to know more. And so I really want to make a game that makes people feel something, because that means that they were invested. If you're not feeling something, it could be joy, it could be laughter, it could be happiness, sadness, sorrow, grief, frustration. That last one's a little bit of but if you're not feeling something, you're probably not invested. So how do you make a game that makes people feel? 1, let your players grieve. And that's a weird thought to just open the gate out. But if your players lose something, anything, an important NPC, their character, an item, give them time to process. This is a game. It is not reality, but it means something to all of us. And if a player loses something and you gloss over it, it makes it clear to them you don't think it's worth focusing on. It's not worth paying attention to or feeling for. That sucks. That really draws away from what they want to do. So let your players grieve a loss. Let them know that the emotions that they feel and the things that they care about matter. Don't gloss over that. 2, find the core lesson that each character is learning together. This is weird. It is a weird phenomenon. I don't know how it happens, but when players play D&D together, somehow, some way, a unique theme begins to present itself amongst all the players. I will take the most recent series of Critical Role. All of the players had difficulties with their all the characters had difficulties with their families and their backstories. They wrote their backstories separate to each other, but it just ended up happening. And so the theme of the campaign became family. It became found family, and what does family mean? And right now, with no spoilers, the biggest, baddest, evil guy in the campaign represents failure of family to them. And I won't elaborate on that. Anybody who's watched the campaign knows what I'm talking about. But family became important. In the first campaign I ever ran, what ended up being the most important and the biggest theme of all was how to reconcile with not having a home. Each of the characters who were in there didn't have a home to go back to because it had been destroyed, it had been tarnished. It was not something that they could go back to anymore. And the final battle of the campaign ended up being fighting for one of the characters' homes, and ended up being facing off against one of the most powerful forces in the entire universe, Tiamat, to defend the home that one of them had made. Home became the entire point of the entire campaign and the theme amongst all of them. Somehow, some way, when you have a bunch of players who are invested, there's a core lesson that needs to be learned. For Critical Role, it was, what does family mean? For the first campaign I ran, it was, what does home mean? Find the core lesson and make the biggest, baddest evil guy an antithesis of that lesson. Make them something that directly contradicts what the players are trying to learn and have them overcome that. And lastly, check in with your players outside of the table. Talk with them. Ask them simple questions. Talk with them about their characters. Talk with them about the story. Ask them, hey, what's something I'm doing good? What's something I'm doing bad? What can I do better at? What is something you're hoping to see in the campaign? What are your theories about what's happening? Talk to them outside of the game. It develops a feeling of care and responsibility with the game when you do that. And it really creates a connection. The only thing that I would caution you against is don't only ever talk to them about the game. I do this sometimes, but these people that you are spending all this time with are your friends. And D&D is only one facet of the way that you guys can truly interact and enjoy each other's presence. So don't just talk to them about the game. Do talk to them outside the session, but get to know the person as well. And that will help you create an even better story. So once again, even though I had a script, I was rambling a lot, but this is a topic that is so near and dear to my heart and I care so much about. So please let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please go ahead and like and subscribe. But at the end of the day, all I ask that you do is you go out into the world, don't let it get you down, make it your own, do what you enjoy, and never forget to play your role. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.